In November of 2025, 22-year-old Rebecca K. Park was in that fragile space between almost and any day now. She was 38 weeks pregnant and counting down to the moment she'd finally get to meet her baby boy. Instead, she vanished. According to those around her, Rebecca disappeared one night from rural Wexford County, Michigan, after a visit with family. Some said she was supposed to be going out for ice cream. Others claimed she got into a car with tinted windows driven by someone no one could identify. What everyone agreed on was this. After that night, Rebecca stopped answering her phone, stopped messaging, stopped existing in the places she usually lived. She was simply gone. Weeks later, searchers would find Rebecca's body in a remote stretch of the Manistee National Forest. She'd been left under leaves, exposed to the elements, and the horror didn't stop there. Rebecca, who had been just days away from giving birth, no longer had her baby with her. Her unborn son was missing, cut from her body. From that moment on, this was no longer just a missing persons case. It was a homicide, a nightmare, and a race to find out what happened to both Rebecca and her child. And as investigators pulled phone records and began questioning people, they discovered that the world surrounding Rebecca was packed with criminal histories, registered sex offenders, tangled relationships, and people who lied easily and often. Everyone seemed to have a different version of Rebecca's final days. Everyone had someone else to blame. And the deeper you go into this case, the clearer it becomes that Rebecca was living in a minefield of manipulation, violence, selfishness, and ulterior motives. What nobody could have imagined at the beginning, though, was who would ultimately be charged with her murder. Not a stranger in that mysterious dark car, not some faceless predator lurking in the woods. The truth of who prosecutors say is responsible for Rebecca's death and the disappearance of her baby boy is the most disturbing part of this story.
What you can't explain, is coming back again. I can see it now, I can see it now. What you can't explain, coming back again.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. So when I first started digging into this case, I thought it would be straightforward coverage of a missing pregnant woman. Tragic, of course, but something with a clear structure, clear timeline, clear motive. But very quickly I realized that nothing about Rebecca Park's world or this case was clear, and absolutely nothing about this investigation was going to be straightforward. From the moment Rebecca was reported missing, everyone around her was rushing to establish their narrative on traditional media and social media. They took to TikTok and live streams, throwing out their own versions of events, but the events didn't just change from person to person depending on who was talking. They changed within each singular person's own accounts. And these weren't minor inconsistencies. These were timelines that shifted overnight, accusations that changed mid-sentence, stories that contradicted each other every time someone opened their mouth, stories that didn't make any sense. Trying to research this case felt like trying to hold on to smoke. Every time I thought I had something pinned down, someone involved would go live and rewrite the entire timeline, and then the arrest started, and with them, the release of probable cause affidavits. And as I read these documents, I sat there absolutely stunned. I've been doing this for a long time. I've read and researched some of the worst things human beings are capable of and capable of doing to each other, but this stopped me cold. The level of cruelty, the planning, the betrayal, the sheer horror of what Rebecca must have gone through in those final hours is almost impossible to process. And when it came time to sit down and write this video, I honestly didn't know where to begin. How do you take such toxicity and dysfunction and make sense of it? How do you talk about something this monstrous and shape it into a story that the human mind can even comprehend? We're going to try, but heads up, this one is going to be very difficult for all of us. Rebecca and her child deserve to have this story told, and they deserve for a very strong microscope to be placed over the people that so cruelly and pointlessly ended their lives. We have a lot to talk about today, but before we begin, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Aura Frames. Today's video is sponsored by Aura Frames, and honestly, this is one of those things that feels too easy to talk about because this is genuinely one of my most favorite things in my house, in my office, and a holiday gift that I have given to many people that never ever misses. The Aura Frame is a smart digital photo frame that stays connected to Wi-Fi so it can automatically receive photos and videos sent straight from the Aura app on any phone. Aura Frames are super easy to use and the photos look like real prints. Truly, the quality is gorgeous. You can upload unlimited photos and videos using their app, and anyone in the family can add to the frame at any time from anywhere. It's honestly the best way to keep people feeling close, even when everyone's scattered during the year or around the holidays. I have given the Aura Frame to almost every single person in my life that matters to me because the memories we make and share together matter more than anything. My mom has one, my dad has one, both of my siblings have one, I have one, and the cool thing is we can all update our own Aura Frames and send pictures to each other's Aura Frames. And this can be a sweet and sentimental activity or a silly one. So my sister and I actually compete over who can send the weirdest photos to my mom's frame and then who's the first to get a reaction out of her. Sometimes when we're bored, we do that. And if you're giving one as a gift and you're sending it to somebody who doesn't live close to you, you can even preload photos before it ships. So when the person gets it and opens it up, they get to immediately enjoy it. It's one of those gifts that just lands, no matter who you're buying it for. And let me show you this one, the Carver Mat. It's named the #1 digital frame by Wirecutter, and you can see why. The color, the clarity, how it adjusts to the light in the room so your photos always look perfect. It's a gift that people rave about long after the holidays are over. I love my Aura Frame so much, not only because it's super easy to use, you can set it up in 2 minutes. It's also really easy to keep updated with new photos, and there's not a ton of steps to go through. You don't have to, plug anything into a computer, which makes it perfect for the technologically challenged like myself. But I feel so much happiness when I walk by it in my house or my office and I see these beautiful photos of myself and my loved ones in the happiest moments of our lives. A lot of times I even stop and I'll take a few minutes to watch the photos scroll, and it reminds me to be mindful, to live in the moment, and feel the gratitude that we so often lose sight of throughout our busy and hectic days. Like I said, it is super easy to use. You just download the app, connect it to your Aura Frame. I have several frames because, like I said, I have one at the office. I have one at my house. You choose the frame that you're working with. You can change the settings to kind of dictate how quickly the photos scroll through. You can kind of crop the photos to make them look the way you want. You can add photos. You can even like photos on your frame or someone else's frame and make a comment so that person sees it. Very, very easy. But now for the good part. Aura's set up an exclusive deal just for viewers of this channel. So for a limited time, you can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames. Remember, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using the promo code stephanieharlowe at checkout. So that's auraframes.com and use promo code stephanieharlowe. And you're going to get $35 off your frame. This deal is exclusive to viewers of this channel, and frames do sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the channel by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Grab the Carver Mat while the offer is still live, and make sure to use that promo code Stephanie Harlowe. Trust me, this is the easiest win you'll have in your holiday shopping this year. Thank you so much to Aura Frames for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. As always, to understand what happened at the end, we have to go back to the beginning, and it seemed like the start of Rebecca Park's life was not ideal. She and her 2 siblings were removed from their biological mother's home when they were very young. They were taken into foster care and placed with a woman named Stephanie Park, and this would be the woman who would become the only real mother they would ever know. When they were removed from their biological mother's care, Rebecca, or Becca as her friends and family called her, was just a year old. Stephanie Park would eventually adopt all three siblings when their biological parents' rights were terminated, and she later said, quote, "They were sweet little kids. We raised them their entire lives. All foster kids are fragile, and I made sure they stayed with us so they didn't have to deal with any more trauma." End quote. Now, Becca's siblings included a younger sister, Kimberly, who, trust me, will come into play during this case. We're going to talk about Kimberly quite a bit, and also an older brother who I won't name because he hasn't really been involved with any of this at all. Eventually, Stephanie Park would also end up adopting Becca's two little boys, who I believe at this point are 2 and 3 years old, and Kimberly's young daughter, who I think is under a year old. Stephanie Park said, quote, "Becca knew she couldn't raise the kids the way we raised her, and she wanted to make sure no matter what happened, she'd have access to them and they'd be raised safely and loved like she was." End quote. Now, at this point, I have no idea who Becca's biological father was or if she shared the same father as her siblings. I know that she probably didn't share the same father as her sister, Kimberly, because Kimberly's referred to as Becca's half-sister, and we know that Becca and Kimberly shared the same mother. But what we do know is that throughout her life, Becca did not have a close relationship with her biological mother, Courtney. In fact, it seems she didn't even have any contact with Courtney until she was 18, and then she took it upon herself to reach out and make contact. So despite a rough start and mistakes made along the way, people who knew her have had no shortage of nice things to say about Becca and fond memories to hold on to in her absence.
You're so loved, Becca!
She was artistic, very artistic.
She had an amazing voice. Just listening to her sing actually it made me smile.
Busting out singing to the silliest songs possible and wouldn't stop until they were all singing and dancing like they didn't care who was watching.
She painted things, she grew things, she loved flowering, gardening, and she was good with animals.
I want people to remember her, as the good person she was.
One of my most recent memories with her that I will never forget would have to be when I went to her house and we sat talking about the baby. And we were talking about doing a gender reveal party. We spent hours flipping through little outfits that she wanted for him. And then I did her hair and makeup just to give her a pick-me-up.
She loved to go up to the cabin in the UP and go fishing and swimming, and that was probably some of our best times. We're going to the cabin and just being out in the woods.
She was a beautiful soul.
Caleb Hudson, who dated Rebecca Park for 2 years, described her as someone who was always happy and who wanted the people she cared about to feel happiness as well. Caleb remembered how dedicated Becca was to lifting his spirits when his mother was diagnosed with leukemia, and he said, quote, "She would want to make anybody smile. She didn't like when people were sad, mad, depressed, and if they were, she would find a way to make them smile." End quote. But after the relationship with Caleb ended, Becca found herself romantically involved with a new man, Richard Fahler. I'm going to be straight with you here. There's a lot about Richard Fahler to dislike. The two actually met through Becca's biological mother, Courtney Bartholomew, but as it turns out, weirdly enough, Courtney and Rich had also had an intimate romantic relationship. They were together at some point. Now, it seems like maybe they were together before Becca, and then later we're going to find out, according to Courtney, they were also together while Becca and Rich were in the middle of a relationship and they took a break or whatever, but we're going to talk more about that later. Trust me, but that's not all. Rich's father, who's also named Richard Fahler, which is why I'm going to call the younger Richard Fahler Rich, he would tell the media that his son Rich is pretty mellow, aside from getting into some trouble as a juvenile when he was found to be in possession of a motorcycle that was reported stolen by a neighbor. So Rich may be a pretty mellow kind of guy and everything, but the truth is that he would end up spending 16 years behind bars for various offenses, and the sex offender registry shows that he has 5 separate convictions. So the first happened when he was 20 and involved a child between the ages of 13 and 15. In 2005, he was convicted of criminal sexual conduct with an incapacitated victim or victims. So That's messed up. In May of 2015, he was convicted of accosting a child for immoral purposes. The following month, he was charged with second-degree criminal sexual assault, and in September of 2015, he was convicted of criminal sexual conduct with a child between the ages of 13 and 15 again. So I think it goes without saying that however mellow Rich Fahler is, he's a dirtbag, and not really the kind of guy you would want to see dating a 20-year-old when he's in his 40s. And stunningly enough, and surprisingly to me, Rich Fahler is going to be the least unsavory person in this whole situation. I mean, they all suck, okay? They all suck, honestly. And I hate to feel that he's the one who's being the most honest. He's the one that's kind of really the least involved, but it's starting to look like that, actually. So the two did form a relationship. Rebecca became pregnant and they got engaged. And that's when they started living with Rich's 62-year-old father just outside of Manton, Michigan. Let's talk about this area for a second because it seems like every man that Rebecca knew was on the sex offender registry. And I also find it very weird and odd and unsettling that no one seemed to bat an eye that this young girl was in a romantic relationship with someone like Rich Fahler, given his age, given his criminal history. And we all are, to some extent, a product of our environment. So let's talk about the environment. Wexford County sits in the northern lower peninsula of Michigan. It's very rural, heavily wooded, quiet, spread out. It's the type of region where you can drive for miles on 2 tracks and unpaved roads without seeing another home, where cell service drops in and out, and where dense forest can conceal just about anything, at least for a little while. Now, this area is a mix of hardworking families, retirees, and, in certain pockets, people living extremely rough and unstable lives. So I want to be really clear. I'm not trying to paint, with a broad stroked brush or whatever. I'm not trying to pass judgment or make, general observations, but some of you will still be offended. I want to be clear, whenever you're trying to understand how a situation like this becomes possible, how certain people cross paths, why certain dangers go unnoticed, why vulnerable individuals end up surrounded by instability their whole lives, you have to look at the bigger picture. And that includes things like the local economy, drug activity, crime rates, and honestly, the overall resources available to a community. So factors like poverty, addiction, lack of opportunity, and high crime aren't judgments about individuals. They're simply conditions that shape behavior, stress, lifestyle choices, and risk. Wexford County is economically below state averages with a lower household income, higher rates of unemployment, high rates of housing instability, and limited job opportunities outside of manual labor and seasonal tourism. And as far as crime goes, Wexford County struggles heavily with drugs, basically, methamphetamine use and manufacturing, opioid addiction, prescription pill abuse, and long criminal histories that cycle through generations. And they don't have a ton of violent crime, but they just have a lot of branch off crimes, the kind of crimes you'd expect to see from people who are in active drug addiction, thefts, break-ins, things like that. Additionally, it's not necessarily that Wexford County breeds sex offenders. It's simply that rural Michigan in general has a disproportionately high number of sex offenders per capita, and this is for several reasons. But mainly, people with felony records often relocate to these rural counties where the housing is not only cheaper, but it's easier to rent without something like, a background check. And these rural areas often have fewer resources for monitoring these types of individuals. So when you ask how Rebecca Park ended up in the company of so many men with sex offender status, it wasn't that she was necessarily choosing to be around these people, although there is some personal choice involved here. She was surrounded by a community where nearly everyone struggled with addiction. Many had long criminal histories, friends, family, roommates all blended together in unstable and chaotic ways, and people drifted in and out of relationships with each other very easily. For instance, let's look at where Rebecca lived with her fiancé, Rich Fahler. Like I mentioned, they lived with Rich's dad, Richard, in 2 single-wide conjoined trailers on North 41 and a half Road in Manton. Richard Failer Sr. said that they lived there with several other family members, including many of his adult grandchildren. So we got a ton of people living in the same sort of residence. Richard also said that Rebecca and Rich had moved out of his place for a few months, and they'd been fixing up an inoperable motorhome that was on the property of a neighbor. The whole plan was to get this motorhome ready, and then they would live there together with their baby when the baby arrived. But then the neighbor got arrested for drugs, and they had to move back to Richard's home shortly before Rebecca's disappearance. Now, I'm not going to give you the exact address, but I have Richard Failer's address, and I looked into it, and there's actually another man who listed his address as the same one where Rebecca lived with Rich at Richard Failer's house, and he's also a registered sex offender. A lot of people in this case are, so do with that what you will. We will come back to it. Now, Rich's father said that as far as he could tell, his son and Rebecca had a tumultuous relationship at times, but it was never violent, and they were happy about having a baby. They were looking forward to having a baby together. Okay, so once again, it's hard to figure out where to start. I'm going to start pretty broad and then narrow down with more details as we go. Rebecca Park, who was 38 weeks pregnant, was reported missing on November 4th, 2025 by her 21-year-old half-sister, Kimberly Park. Let's rewind a bit to November 1st, which was a Saturday, when Rebecca and her sister Kimberly both went to their mother's house, their mother's Courtney, and the house is located in Boone, Michigan. They went there for dinner. Reportedly, at that time, Courtney was supposed to give both her daughters some money that was an inheritance from their grandmother. In a voice message sent to a friend, Becca talked about this dinner.
It tastes like gluten-free fucking lasagna. It wasn't too bad though. I ate half of it. I mean, we had our own personal dishes, but I ate half of it, and that's all I could do. But other than that, check. Apparently, she had it in an envelope, and I don't know what the fuck is going on, but she gave me the envelope, and fucking my sister opened hers up. There's no check. Same goes for me. And we confronted Courtney about it hardcore, and she's like, well, that's because I knew it was all about the fucking money. And I still have the money in the check and shit. It's in cash or whatever, check or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, for one, it's not just about the money, and it's not about all money either for me. Yeah, the money would help out, but if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. It's not a big deal. It's one of those things. And I told her that. And she's like, okay, well. And then she's like, well, I also realized that it wasn't about the money when I dropped stuff off at Rich's dad's house for you, which was after the dinner because I left it there, which was something for the baby. But yeah. And she wanted to take me out for shakes. Well, I told her, yeah, I'll go out for shakes, whatever. But yeah, and so that's how she figured out that it wasn't just all fucking just about money. Like, I'm not trying to just make it all about money, and I really don't give a fuck. But I told her that. So today she's supposed to actually give me the actual shit, but we'll see how that goes. And which means money-wise, and go out for shakes. So we'll see. Dude, it's been a long day and a long night for me. Between Courtney and being tired as fuck. Yeah. And then when I lay down, it was so bad, like, I couldn't even lay down. Like, I felt like I was trying to push, like, involuntarily push with my stomach. And it was so bad, dude. And I couldn't stop moving around, like I was antsy and everything. Yeah. I still kind of am, but not too bad as it was when I was in the vehicle. Well, shit, man. But I guess it went good and it went bad as well. So it depends on how the way you look at it and how people look at it, I guess. I'm looking at it as it went, yeah. So that's how I feel.
So you heard Rebecca say that for dinner they had lasagna. served in separate dishes. And she said it tasted gluten-free or something like that, and she ate half of it. I want to put a pin in this because something about the lasagna doesn't settle right with me. And it kind of brings me back to Erin Patterson and the mushroom case. Why were the girls served lasagna in separate dishes? Lasagna is, a layered dish, right? Pasta and meat and cheese and sauce. And it's not like hard to make, but it's time consuming because you got to layer everything, make sure it's good. I'm hungry now. I want lasagna. It's delicious. So why would Courtney go to all of this time and energy to make the lasagna in separate dishes to serve her daughters? And this immediately, when I heard it, and especially hearing Rebecca say like she wasn't feeling good, her stomach hurt, things like that, I was wondering, did Courtney or somebody put something in this lasagna that was served to Rebecca? But like I said, we'll put a pin in that. It's just something that occurred to me. So then after dinner, their mother, Courtney, presented both Rebecca and Kimberly with envelopes that supposedly had their inheritance inside. But when they opened the envelopes were empty. Now, apparently, Courtney claims to have done this intentionally because she felt it was all about the money. I don't know exactly what this means, what she means by it's all about the money, but just from context clues, I summarized that Courtney was saying, you girls are only here having dinner with me because you want the money. Otherwise, you wouldn't be spending time with me. And it does seem to be pretty accurate. Rich Fahler, Rebecca's fiance, said that even though Becca had made contact with her mother when she turned 18, so they knew of each other, they were in each other's lives, they were not close. They had a rocky relationship. And Becca didn't really spend a ton of time with Courtney. So Courtney is basically saying, I brought you over here to give you money, but I didn't give you money because I suspected it was all about the money. And now I know it's not, so I'll give you the money another time. Now, you also heard Rebecca say that after the dinner, her mother, Courtney, later that night dropped some baby stuff off to her at Rich's house. And then Rebecca says that her mother is supposed to give her the money, the inheritance, when they go out for shakes. That was going to happen the following day, Sunday, November 2nd. But it didn't end up happening because that day Rebecca went to the hospital thinking she was in labor. Ultimately, this was a false alarm. Rebecca was only 1 centimeter dilated. She was sent home. Now, Courtney gave both Rebecca and Rich a ride back to Rich's dad's house that night, and then she and Rebecca made plans to grab ice cream the following day, Monday, November 3rd. So Courtney did pick Rebecca up the next night to go and get the shakes and apparently to give her the money from her inheritance. Rich Fahler said that Courtney arrived to his place around 6:45 p.m. He said that most of that day, Rebecca and he had spent all their time in bed watching movies because Becca had woken up at 3 a.m. not feeling well. She said her stomach was hurting and she was tired, so they kind of took it easy that day before Courtney came to pick Becca up. When Courtney did come to get Becca, Rich said he figured that Becca would be gone for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, but he fell asleep about 45 minutes after she left. I don't know if I really believe that whole timeline, 45 minutes after she left. If she got picked up at 6:30, you're saying you fell asleep like right after 7 p.m. That doesn't make sense. But Rich said he then woke up at 1 a.m. and he saw Becca wasn't home yet. And he claims he tried to call her a few times, but she didn't answer. So he went back to sleep. He said that he wasn't too worried at that time about where she was because sometimes Becca would go to friends' houses and she'd sleep there. He also claims that when he woke up at 1 a.m. and called Becca, he did not see messages from Courtney. Okay, so when he wakes up at 1 a.m., he calls Becca. He doesn't see messages from her mother, Courtney. But the following morning when he woke up, he noticed that Courtney had called and texted him a bunch the night before. She actually called him a lot. She called him a lot and then she started texting him like, answer the phone, et cetera, et cetera. And this communication began around 11 p.m. with, like I said, Courtney calling. And then when he didn't answer, texting Rich to call her back and then sending a text that said, quote, your old lady took off with some dude in a black car, end quote. Now, according to Becca's mother, Courtney, she had picked Becca up from Rich's and then they ran some errands together before heading back to Courtney's house because Becca said she needed Tide Pods, like laundry detergent. Courtney claims she left Becca in the car when they pulled up to her house, and then she ran inside to get the Tide Pods, but when she came back out, her daughter told her that she had someone coming to pick her up.
She's like, Mom, hold up. I got somebody coming. I'm like, what do you mean you got somebody coming? And she's like, I got somebody coming to get me.
Courtney says soon a black car with tinted windows she's never seen before pulls up.
She got out of the car, turned around, opened the door back up. She's like, Mom, I'll be back. And she got in the car. They crept up by my truck real slow. And by the time they got to the front of my truck, they took off.
Courtney says she and Becca have a somewhat rocky relationship. Becca was in foster care in her youth, but she loves Becca and was looking forward to her grandson's birth.
So after not being able to get in touch with Becca Tuesday morning, Rich used one of her phones to track the location of the other. So according to Rich, Becca had two phones, one that was active, which she had with her, and one that was turned off, inactive, but she would use it on Wi-Fi, and she'd left that phone at home. So Rich went into Becca's Google account to track her active phone, and he saw that it was located on a 2-track near Courtney's home, which is located on South 21.5 Road in Boone. Like I said, about 25 miles away from Manton, where Rebecca lived with Rich. I did not know what a 2-track was, I have to admit, and I kept seeing the words 2-track come up. And so I had to look it up, and I found out that a 2-track is an unpaved path created by the tires of vehicles driving through the same area over and over, forming 2 parallel tracks with grass or dirt in the middle. So in places like Wexford County, 2 tracks cut through hunting land, state land, remote areas used for logging or off-roading, and the Manistee National Forest, where, as we know from the intro, Rebecca Park's body would eventually be found. The Manistee National Forest is a massive stretch of federally managed wilderness in the northern lower peninsula of Michigan. It's huge. It covers over 500,000 acres, and it spans multiple counties, including Wexford. But what's important to know is that the Manistee National Forest is not necessarily one solid, continuous block of woods. It's made up of patches, corridors, and fragmented sections that sort of weave in and out of rural communities. And Courtney Bartholomew's house, Rebecca's mother, Courtney's house, is right at the border of forest land. So if you stood in Courtney's front yard, you could practically walk straight across the road into the woods, and those woods are national forest land. So Rebecca's phone was found on a 2-track across the street from Courtney's house, like kind of into the woods. But not far into the woods. Remember that. So when Rich found this out, where the phone was, he called Rebecca's sister Kimberly to let her know. And he sent her a screenshot of the location of the phone, with the GPS coordinates. Kimberly then told her mother, Courtney, about the location of the phone. And according to Courtney, she and her husband, Bradley Bartholomew, they went out to find the phone. Courtney would later tell Deputy Reed of the Wexford County Sheriff's Office that they found the phone lying off the 2 tracks about 200 yards from her house. It's not far. Courtney was also asked about the night before, since at this point she's technically the last known person to see her daughter Rebecca before Becca goes missing. And she told Deputy Reed that she had picked Becca up from Rich Failer's house at around 8:30 p.m. so they could go to Culver's and get ice cream. On the way to Culver's, Becca mentioned needing Tide Pods, so Courtney drove to her house to get the Tide Pods, and then when she came out, Becca told her someone was coming to get her. Courtney said that after a few minutes, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up across the street from her house, and then Rebecca got out of Courtney's car, crossed the road, and got into the front passenger side of that vehicle. Courtney claimed she could not tell what the make or model of the car was. She couldn't tell how many people were inside or if the driver was a man or a woman, which doesn't really track since we know she texted Rich around 11 p.m. that same night telling him that Rebecca had gotten into a car with some dude. So after finding Becca's phone, Courtney said she drove it right over to Rich Failer and left it with him. On November 5th, Rebecca's sister, Kimberly Park, she goes to the sheriff's office and she talked to Detective Lieutenant Pisker. She brought Becca's phone that had been retrieved from the 2-track with her to give to the police. Kimberly told the detective that she'd looked through her sister's phone to see what Rebecca's last communications had been, and she said that the last text message on the phone was from Sunday, November 2nd, and the last call was from their mother, Courtney, that same day at 9:14 p.m. Now, Kimberly also said that Rebecca used her phone every single day, and since she didn't see anything from Monday, November 3rd, she felt the cell phone record from that day may have been deleted. Now, I want to interject correct something in here because remember, I mentioned that some people who had known Rebecca had been going on social media and putting out their narratives about what happened and whose fault it was. Those people were Richard Failer, Courtney Bartholomew, and Kimberly Park. So Rich Failer, Rebecca's fiance, Courtney Bartholomew, Rebecca's bio mother, and Kimberly Park, Rebecca's half-sister. So Rich would have an interview with a YouTube channel called Steph's Case Files. And he said that when Courtney and Bradley Bartholomew brought Rebecca's phone to him and handed it to him, he saw that it had been powered down. It was turned off. And he said he felt that was odd because if the phone had been off before, he wouldn't have been able to track it. He also said he knew it wasn't off due to the battery dying because as soon as he had the phone back, he turned it on and it powered right up. So keep that in mind. Kimberly then played for Detective Pisker a few voice messages that she'd received from her mother, Courtney Bartholomew. And I guess these voice messages were like potential leads, like suspects, people who could be involved, anybody who could want to hurt Rebecca, things like that. One of these voice messages said that someone named Araya Clark had called Courtney and told her that two people in a car had pulled up to the Revival Center looking for Narcan. And I guess they said that the pregnant woman who was missing, quote, got what she fucking deserved, end quote. Courtney then stated that Araya had heard this from someone named Serena Roosh, who had told Rusty Clark, who is Araya's father. And I guess Araya was friends with Rebecca. Courtney also said in this voice message, quote, I guess it was an older guy that your sister left with, end quote. And then Kimberly, Rebecca's sister, told Detective Pisker that as far as she knew, the only older guy Becca hung out with was someone named Stephen Billett. And she calls him a pervert. So I can't tell because this isn't a police report if Kimberly is saying that Becca called Stephen Billett a pervert or if Kimberly was calling Stephen Billett a pervert. But either way, this guy was contacted by the police and they concluded that it did not appear he had contact with Rebecca Park. Another voice message from Courtney said, quote, okay, when Randy passed away, I was told that your sister had something to do with it. That would give Randy's family a murder revenge thing because she was involved when it came to Randy, end quote. So we don't know who Randy is at this point. I mean, I have an idea of who Randy is, but it's not really important. What's important is that Courtney Bartholomew is trying to throw anything and everything out. Like she's taking every plot from the show Ozark and trying to make it fit for why Rebecca's gone. You know, it's a murder family revenge plot because Rebecca was involved with this Randy guy apparently going to prison or dying or something. I don't know. It's a long story. None of it really matters, okay? But apparently, and according to Courtney, Stephen Billett was connected to Randy's family as well. So she said, quote, I would definitely be looking at them, end quote. Look at them. Look anywhere but over here is what Courtney Bartholomew is saying. But then Kimberly was asked by the detective, do you trust Courtney? And her response was, not really, which, I mean, is probably one of the only valid things she's going to say throughout this investigation. However, Kimberly did seem genuinely concerned about where Becca was, and she also seemed to be spearheading the contact with law enforcement, having been the one to report her sister missing, bring the phone in, and she seemed she was trying to figure out what could have happened.
Becca's younger half-sister, Kimberly Park, says they're close.
We talk at least 2 to 3 times a day, if not more.
Kimberly says she doesn't know what to think. She says Becca has disappeared before, but she usually kept in contact with someone.
I honestly try not to think about what happened. I mean, she's disappeared before, but someone always knew where she was, and it was usually me hiding her out.
She hopes that's what's happened in this case, but Becca needs to contact her.
It bugs me every day. I'm losing sleep. I'm constantly screwing up at my job, so it's really hard.
And listen, I believe that Kimberly and Rebecca were close. I believe that Kimberly was genuinely worried and that she probably would not have wanted anything bad to happen to her sister. But over the course of the investigation, we're going to find out some things about this family that probably they never wanted anyone to find out about unless they did. And then they just don't care how bad or weird or toxic it looks. Like they're shameless about it, maybe. I don't know. I honestly would probably say they don't care. These two women, Courtney Bartholomew and her daughter, Kimberly Park, they're going to go online and they're just going to expose everything, all sorts of crazy stuff they say, and they're going to shake out all the family's dirty laundry. It's very odd. They don't seem to have any shame about the things that they do or take part in. So remember I said that before Rich Fahler had started dating Becca, or while he was dating Becca, he had been with her mother, Courtney, who's actually more age appropriate for him, but that's not important. So both Courtney Bartholomew and Kimberly Park would tell investigators after Rebecca went missing that they'd been with Rich Fahler. In fact, Kimberly claimed she was actively in a relationship with Rich, like currently, even though her sister, who she's close with, remember, was pregnant with his child. So there's that. We're going to talk more about it, trust me. And here's a clip of Rich, who went on the news and started talking about Rebecca and her disappearance and how he's really worried about his pregnant 22-year-old fiancée, who's young enough to be his daughter.
Just keep telling myself every minute that she's going to be found. Her and the little man are going to be safe, okay. Having problems sleeping because for the last 2 years, every night, she's the one I was laying in bed next to. The night she left, I tried to call her a few times because I didn't get no messages, call from her, nothing. And it's just not like her. Because we're together 99% of the time. When we're not, you can ask anybody. We're always on our phones messaging each other.
On Saturday, November 8th, members of All County Search and Rescue, along with Christian Aid Ministries Search and Rescue, with 36 people broken up into 5 teams, they searched the area where Rebecca Park was last seen. So when I say they searched the area around Courtney Bartholomew's home. They searched the area where the phone was found and kind of like deeper into the woods, because if her phone was found in the woods, maybe she walked away, she got lost in the woods, and they would find her. But no additional evidence was recovered. A few days later, law enforcement put in preservation requests for some specific cell towers around Courtney Bartholomew's home between the hours of 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. on November 3rd. And this is basically the police telling AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, don't get rid of anything. Lock down all the data in those cell towers for that time frame, because investigators are going to run a tower dump that's going to give them information about cellular devices that connected to those towers during that time frame. So it's going to give the police the phone numbers, the device IDs, timestamps of when the device is connected to the towers, if there was phone calls or text messages made or sent. We're going to get all this information from that tower dump, and we're going to talk more about the results of that tower dump later on. So all of this time while the investigation's going on, multiple searches for Rebecca were being conducted by the police, canine teams, drones, and people on foot, including volunteer groups that were not affiliated with law enforcement. These initial searches were extensive and included large portions of the Manistee National Forest, but nothing was found. That's important. Nothing was found because, remember, once again, Rebecca's body is going to be found in that forest, not too far from Courtney's home, once again. So they're all searching, and you'd assume they're searching in, a pretty expansive sort of sphere around Courtney's home. They do not find Rebecca. On November 11th, Detective Pisker of the sheriff's office, he interviewed Courtney Bartholomew, and we find out quite a bit from this conversation. Now, Courtney made all sorts of claims, and who knows how much truth is in any of her claims, because I've come to find that this woman lies as easily as she breathes, and it seems she puts the same amount of thought into doing both of those things, which means she lies often and, like I said, seemingly without thinking about what she's saying and the implications of what she's saying. Very Letitia Stauch coded, actually. Now, Courtney Bartholomew claimed that Rich Fahler and Becca had initially been dating, but then they broke up. And then Courtney and Rich started a relationship. Courtney said she'd been planning to divorce her husband, Bradley Bartholomew, but then she found out that she was pregnant. And since she wasn't sure who the father of this baby was, she stopped the divorce 2 weeks before the court date, and then basically didn't leave Bradley Bartholomew. Courtney then says that Rich Fahler was apparently so angry about the fact that she didn't want to go through with her divorce to be with him, that he showed up to her house with the intent to shoot her husband, Bradley Bartholomew. That apparently didn't happen because Bradley Bartholomew is still alive and well, unfortunately. So after this soul-crushing rejection by Courtney that Rich just couldn't get over, he was just so devastated, he resumed his relationship with her daughter, Rebecca. But he couldn't let Courtney go just yet because she's a woman you can't get out of your system that easily. Because Courtney claimed that in February of 2025, Rich Fahler showed up to her house, like forced entry, and then raped her. And this caused her to lose the baby she was carrying. She said that she reported this assault to the police, but Rich was not charged. And that's probably because he didn't do it. And once again, I hate that I have to be up here in front of you guys defending, a sex offender. I really hate it. But what's fair is fair. And you're going to see why I don't believe that Rich did this to Courtney. So I know, don't get mad at me yet. I'm going to elaborate, and we're going to really, dig in deep and see why I think Courtney was probably even lying about being pregnant. But Courtney then talked about how abusive and aggressive Rich Fahler could be. She'd been concerned for her daughter Rebecca, and she'd encouraged Becca to leave Rich. Rich Fahler, of course, tells a different story. I hate to say it, I believe his narrative more, although I'm sure neither Rich nor Courtney is telling the full story. So while he was live on Steph's case files, Rich talks about how Courtney called the Wexler County Sheriff's Department and told them that he'd gone to her house and assaulted her at gunpoint. And the cops came and questioned him, at which point he was like, no, I didn't do that, and I can prove it. Go and check her cameras. So apparently, according to Rich, he said that Courtney has security cameras inside and outside of her house, which brings me to the question of, if you got security cameras inside and outside of your house, then you would think that those security cameras picked up this mysterious dark car with tinted windows and no plates pulling up to pick up Rebecca, right? And hey, it doesn't have plates, you can't track it. And, maybe the windows are tinted, you can't see who's inside, but at least you could figure out what the make and model of the car was. It would be a lead, but no, because apparently, according to Courtney, what we'll come to find, she does have security cameras, but they're only live. You can watch them live, but she can't afford SD cards to put in the security cameras and actually record anything that was happening, even though she did apparently have these back in February because Rich Fahler would end up not being charged for this alleged assault at gunpoint that Courtney reported. Also, according to Rich, Courtney wasn't this protective motherly figure to Becca that she claimed to be. She was actually an op. Rich said that when Courtney first found out that Becca was pregnant, she sent threatening messages to Becca's phone. And he said, quote, "The only one that has ever threatened Becca is Courtney, and it's been since we announced that she was pregnant." End quote. So the host of Steph's case files, she asked Rich, do you think that Courtney was jealous? Because this host had heard that Courtney has a weird obsession with being pregnant. She liked to be pregnant a lot. And Rich said yes, because Courtney had threatened Becca a few times, stating that she was not going to let her have Rich's child. Rich also said that when Becca was pregnant with her oldest son, Courtney and her husband, Bradley Bartholomew, were upset with Becca and they tried to hit her in the stomach with a baseball bat. And then Rich talked about some items Becca had left at Courtney's house at one time, like some clothes, a duffel bag. And when she went to the house to try to get those things, Courtney's son, Bentley, threatened Rebecca with a baseball bat. Okay, so back to Courtney's November 11th police interview. She told Detective Pisker about the dinner at her house with her two daughters, Rebecca and Kimberly. She said she'd given them empty envelopes because her plan had been to give Becca cash, but she didn't want Kimberly to feel left out, so she planned to have Kimberly set up a bank account so that Courtney, could then put money in that account for Kimberly, which doesn't make a lick of sense, but okay. Courtney then talked about the plans that she had with Rebecca to get milkshakes. And that was supposed to happen the next day after the dinner, but then Becca had to go to the hospital. And Courtney said that while Becca and Rich were at the hospital, both she and her husband Bradley visited them there. This is going to be important. We're going to come back to it. So Courtney then drove Becca and Rich home from the hospital. And she claimed that when they got to Rich's house and he was taking some bags out of the car, Becca leaned over to her and whispered that Rich was acting like a real ass. Courtney then told Becca she would pick her up the following day for their milkshakes. And the next night, she picked Becca up from the Failer residence between 6:30 and 7 p.m. That's interesting because that time does line up with Rich's story of when Courtney picked Becca up that night, which was November 3rd. But during Courtney's first interview with Sergeant Reed, which I believe took place the following day on November 4th, when Rebecca was reported missing, Courtney had said she'd picked Becca up at 8 p.m. So the story's already changing. But according to the affidavits, Courtney's cell phone data actually supports this timeline, that she picked Becca up between 6:30 and 7, and then they drove to Courtney's house. Okay, so this is interesting because remember, during her November 4th interview, Courtney said, oh, we ran some errands. We ran some errands. She's not specific, right? We ran some errands, and then we went to my house to get the Tide Pods. But now Courtney's saying, I picked Becca up, and we went right to my house to get the Tide Pods. So there's no errands, and there's no ice cream. What the heck? Like, Becca's been, being told she's going to get ice cream for days at this point. She's a pregnant woman who has cravings for ice cream, and you're not doing that. So it's also worth noting that when Detective Pisker asked Courtney to come in for this interview on November 11th, she did not want to at first. She pushed back. She tried to tell him that her initial interview with Sergeant Reed, it should have been enough. Yeah, it should have been enough for someone who didn't want to risk their story changing, but it should not have been enough for someone who was innocent, who genuinely wanted to find their missing daughter. All right, so Courtney picks up Becca from Rich's house, and Courtney said that as they drove away from the Failers, Becca looked tired and stressed, and she told her mother that she was upset with Rich because he kept hounding her to get money so he could fix his truck. Courtney said she once again urged Becca to leave Rich, but Becca was too afraid to do that. Now later, when Courtney goes on a live on YouTube, she's directly asked, like, hey, did Becca ever tell you anything about Rich? Like, that he was abusive, that he was this? Did she ever talk to you about how she was afraid of him or wanted to leave him, et cetera, et cetera? And Courtney's like, no, my daughter did not talk to me about those things. And if I asked and I tried to, pry, she would get mad and defensive and shut down. So we have changing stories. Like I said, remember, Courtney and her daughter Rebecca, they're supposed to be going to get ice cream or milkshakes or some variation of a frozen treat, but in this version of the story, Courtney and Rebecca go right to Courtney's house, where Courtney then claimed to have handed Becca $2,000 in cash. They then talked about a baby shower, which Becca said she didn't want, and once again, Courtney's stories don't make sense because, first of all, Becca said she didn't want to have a baby shower because she didn't want CPS to come and take the baby away. But baby showers usually happen before the baby's born. And even if the baby shower is happening after the baby's born, if CPS is going to come and take your kid away, then why are they going to wait until you're having a baby shower and all your friends and family are there and you're having a party? And what was the reason that Becca was worried that CPS was going to take her kids away? Yes, she had issues with her two previous sons that are now in the custody of Stephanie Park, her adopted mother. But what would make you think before this child's even born that CPS is going to come and take your baby away? Now, there are rumors and allegations and people who say that Rebecca was using drugs at points throughout her life, and she was currently still using drugs during this pregnancy. Rich Failer did say that on a YouTube video. I don't know if that's true, but maybe that's why she was concerned about it. I'm not sure. But either way, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And apparently all this is happening while they're still in the car outside the house. Okay? So they pull up. Courtney gives Becca the money, the $2,000 that apparently she had with her the whole time, and it wasn't inside the house. And they're talking about a baby shower. And the whole time they're talking in the car outside the house, Courtney said that Becca was constantly texting. And she then said she believed Becca had 2 phones and she didn't know which phone Becca was texting on. And then Courtney went into the house, left Becca in the car to get the Tide Pods. She comes back out with the Tide Pods. And then Courtney said that when she came back out, she noticed that Becca deleted something on her phone. But she said Becca didn't notice that she noticed she deleted something on her phone. And Courtney said she didn't know which phone Becca was using when she deleted something. Okay, Courtney comes out of the house with the Tide Pods. She walks up to the car and apparently through the windows sees Becca deleting something on one of her phones. She gets in the car, she starts to pull out of the driveway, and she tells Becca, "I'm going to bring you back home." Apparently, without any ice cream or milkshakes, without any of the long-promised ice cream. And Becca said no, because she had someone coming to pick her up. Now, I suspect that Courtney left any trip to get ice cream out of this version of her story because she knew that the police could pull surveillance from any location Courtney claimed she went with Becca, and they would realize that they had never been there. That's why she said in her first story on November 4th that they had just gone to run errands, like not specific, so they couldn't pull surveillance. Also, I have a sneaking suspicion that by now, Courtney had realized they were getting warrants and stuff for their cell phones, so her cell phone data would show that they had not stopped anywhere after she picked Becca up from the Failers. Also, the location where they were planning to eat ice cream has changed as well. Initially, it was Culver's, and Courtney's also said Burned Dairy. Sometimes it was milkshakes, sometimes it was ice cream. I know it's semantics. I know that I'm just like being nitpicky here, but there's a reason for that. So now Courtney weaves a tale of pulling out of her driveway, and a car slowly pulls up behind her. Now remember, before in her first story, the car had pulled up across the street, but now it was pulling up behind her, and Courtney said the car had dark tinted windows, but there was no plate on it, but she could tell it was a Chevy, and she didn't ask Rebecca who it was because she was afraid she would push Becca away if she asked questions, right? She said Becca would get really snotty if she asked her questions, personal questions, or, if she tried to be a bigger part of her life, Becca would get really mad about that. So Detective Pisker says to Courtney, listen, we've had some social media reports that claimed the car you saw that night had taillights that looked like that of a Chevy Impala. And Courtney was like, yeah, that information came from me. That social media report was started by me because she's talking online. She's, on TikTok. She's commenting on other people's videos and things. And it's suspicious because if you told the police that you couldn't tell what the make or model of the car was, but then you're online saying, but it does have taillights like an Impala, but you're not telling that to the police, why? So this is when Courtney says Becca sees the car. She tells her mother she'll be back. She gets out of Courtney's car, which was a Ford Escape, and she gets into the mysterious black car that possibly might be an Impala, and then the car pulls away. Courtney informed the detective that she didn't follow the car because, once again, she didn't want to upset Becca. Courtney then claimed that at 11 p.m. she reached out to her other daughter, Kimberly Park, so she could get Rich Failer's phone number, and then she tried calling Rich Failer, but he didn't answer when she called, so she sent him a text at 11:30. Now, Detective Pisker asked Courtney about a photo of a check for $18,000 that was made out to Rebecca. And apparently Courtney had sent this picture to Becca, like texted it to her. And Courtney was like, yeah, I sent that picture, but I didn't give that check to Rebecca. Okay, so I'm just going to say this now because I think it's obvious. Clearly the money, the check, the inheritance, all that nonsense was simply bait intended to lure Rebecca to the house. According to Courtney Bartholomew's own statements to law enforcement, both of her daughters, Rebecca and Kimberly, didn't come over to her house a lot, and they didn't really like to come over because they did not like her husband, Bradley Bartholomew. Why? Because he's got a criminal history. Why? He's a sex offender, okay? Courtney said the girls would refuse to go into her house if they knew he was there. So, in my opinion, Courtney had to come up with something really appealing in order to get Rebecca to agree to going to that house that day. But that's just my opinion. Like, money to a young, pregnant woman who's about to have a baby and probably needs things for that baby, that money's going to be appealing, right? And this whole song and dance, like, come over on Saturday, I'll give you the checks. And then the envelopes are empty. And I was like, psych, that was a test to see if you really love me. And now I'll give you the checks, in a few days, but not Kimberly, just Rebecca. Doesn't make any sense. So Detective Pisker then tells Courtney that according to Becca's phone records, she didn't make any calls or send any texts on the evening of November 3rd. That would represent her letting someone know they had to come and pick her up at her mom's house, right? So Courtney's response to this was to tell Detective Pisker that, Rebecca had 2 or 3 phones that she used, right? Her story's changing to accommodate the evidence as it's coming out, because we do know that Becca had 2 phones, but we also know one of those phones was at home with Rich, so she could not have used that to call and text anybody and tell them to come pick her up. And even if she had, at this time, law enforcement has not only Becca's phone that was in her possession the night she went missing, the one that was found across the street from her mother's house, but they have the other inactive phone that was at Rich's house because he gave that to them. So they've checked both phones. There's no sign. And so when they tell her this is Courtney's cue to be like, I forgot she has a 3rd phone, I think, and maybe she used that one to consistently be texting people while we were talking in the car, and then to have somebody come pick her up. Then Courtney starts talking about rumors she's heard from people and about people who could be involved with Rebecca's disappearance. And she mentions 2 people who were supposedly planning to help Becca get away from Rich Failer because Becca was trying to leave Rich because he's abusive and terrible and she's scared of him. Now, Courtney's going to pretend that she cares and she's trying to get these tips and she's welcoming Becca's friends and people who knew her and people in the community to call her and give her, theories about what could have happened so that she can pass them on to the police. And that's not necessarily true, because remember earlier I talked about Kimberly Park playing a voice note for Detective Pisker where Courtney was talking about Araya, this girl Araya, and Araya's dad Rusty, and what they had heard about these 2 people in the car trying to get Narcan, talking about the pregnant woman who vanished getting what she deserved. So I'm going to play you audio that is allegedly Courtney Bartholomew with Bradley's dumbass piping up in the background. And they appear to be talking to this Araya person, and Rusty too, honestly, Araya's dad. And we can kind of see where Courtney's head was at during this time when her daughter was missing.
1, they have searched my property. 2, I didn't touch my fucking daughter. And 3, we already know the fucking info that you're fucking telling us, Araya.
And we got fucking cameras watching the fucking road, you dumb bitch.
So you better fucking watch it. Rusty, you better get your fucking child under control, because she's taking a mother's pain and turning it into a goddamn circus. Fuck you, Araya. You don't have fucking kids that actually you take care of. I do, unfortunately, that you don't have yours because you fucking can't be a mom to yours. So you know what? Fuck you, bitch. You're getting an ass whooping, you keep it up. I'm not playing with you anymore. I already know the goddamn information. My daughter probably left Rich. Y'all can't accept it. Get over it. If that is what she fucking did, then I'm happy for her. I just want to know where she's at and that she's okay. That's all that counts anymore. And you know what? You ever fucking say I laid a hand on my fucking pregnant daughter, Araya, so help me fucking God, you will not like me, bitch. Don't play with me.
So huge shout out to Steph's Case Files. Huge credit to Steph's Case Files for getting this audio. I don't know how she got it, but she's been boots on the ground with this case since it broke. She's got a lot of ties to the community. She knows a lot of people. She's been able to get Rich Failer, Courtney Bartholomew, Kimberly Park, all on her lives. Rich only went on once. But Courtney and Kimberly, man, they went on a bunch of times, and did interviews with Steph's Case Files and just made absolute fools of themselves. But she's been able to get a lot of good information. She's been following this case since the beginning. She's constantly updating. You should check her out. I'll link her channel in the description box. So what did I pick up here? First of all, both Bradley and Courtney sound really angry, really aggressive, violent. They're very threatening, Courtney's threatening this Araya person, like, you're going to get your ass beat. I swear, Araya, like, if I find out that you're saying I touched my daughter, well, you're not going to like me very much. And it feels like she wants to say something more. Like, if I find out you're, talking about me, if I find out my name's in your mouth when it comes to my daughter and you saying I heard her, I'll kill you. It kind of sounded like she wanted to do that, but she was aware she was being recorded, or she just didn't want to say anything stupid, which would be a first for her. I also noticed that Courtney said when she was talking about Araya and how, like, oh, you don't have kids. Your kids were taken away from you because you're a bad mother. But unfortunately, I still have kids that I'm raising that I'm responsible for. Unfortunately, I still have kids that I'm raising and I'm responsible for. Not really the way you want to hear somebody talk about being a mother, but not a crazy thing to expect from this woman, Courtney, who lost all 3 of her children when they were very young. And these kids' foster mother was like, this lady, Courtney, is such bad news that I wanted to make sure I kept those kids away from her for as long as I could, 18 years. Not surprising. So Bradley over there, he says, hey, we have cameras watching the road. But apparently at the time Rebecca went missing, those cameras weren't recording. It would have been great if they were, since they're watching the road. Interesting. And Courtney is saying, get over it. My daughter probably left Rich and y'all can't accept it. So where's your evidence of that, Courtney? What it sounds like is you are getting mad that people aren't buying your story that Rich was this abusive guy to Rebecca and she was unhappy in the relationship and she was trying to get away from him. You're mad that no one's buying the story that you've been planting seeds for. And they're continuing to look for Rebecca because they're worried about her. And you're just like, get over it. Stop looking. Stop looking is what I'm hearing. Don't look over here. She left and you all just can't accept it. So Detective Pisker tells Courtney, listen, there are some beliefs, some accusations that you killed your daughter. And Courtney's response was, quote, why the fuck would I do that? End quote. Why indeed? Why indeed, Courtney? Courtney said she did not know where Rebecca was, but she would never hurt her daughter. So the topic of conversation then moved to a pickup truck that was parked in Courtney's driveway. So this is a white Ford F-150. And reportedly, this truck never moved because it wasn't being actively used, but there was evidence that it had been recently moved. And the detective is confronting Courtney with this evidence that the truck that she told them can't move or doesn't move was moved. And I don't know how they have this evidence. Were the police watching Courtney's house? Possible. Also, there seems to be a group of locals, of citizens of the area who became very invested in Rebecca's case. They were worried about her, right? She's a pregnant woman who's going to give birth any day. She's been missing. And they kind of took it upon themselves to do their own investigations, their own searches. They were constantly in the lives, also talking to Rich and Courtney and Kimberly, asking questions and confronting them with their lies and inaccuracies. And this group of people, which you'll see later, they would actually kind of hang out in front of Courtney's house. And the night before Rebecca's body was found, they actually had a confrontation with Courtney and Bradley Bartholomew outside the house, during which Courtney says something that she probably didn't intend to say, but she does. I'm going to play that for you later. But listen, they could have taken pictures and showed the detectives. They could have been watching the house and showed the police this truck was moving, even though, according to Courtney and Bradley, it didn't move. So Courtney said, oh, this truck, this Ford F-150, it doesn't have seats in it, but we did move it recently so we could make room to access the front porch of the house. So Detective Pisker also talked to Bradley Bartholomew on November 11th. And Brad basically confirmed, yes, me and Rebecca do not get along. He said she didn't like him because of his criminal history. Once again, he's a sex offender. We'll talk about his criminal record later. He also claimed that he was not home at all. He wasn't there at the house on Monday, November 3rd, when Rebecca came with Courtney to the house to get the Tide Pods. He said he was at his place, right? And you're thinking, oh, he lives somewhere else? He has another home? No. Apparently, Bradley Bartholomew's place is an area in the woods that he sometimes lives in, and it's near the Harrietta fish hatchery, because That's normal, right? That's completely normal. I have a house that I live in with my wife, but sometimes I live in the woods just because, I like to get back to nature. So then Detective Pisker, he tries to confirm Bradley's presence there at his spot in the woods. Who were you with? Like, were you using your phone? Did someone see you? Can someone confirm you were there? And Bradley was like, no, unfortunately, I was there in the woods at my spot all alone. And my phone was with my wife, Courtney, because her phone was about to be shut off. Okay, so I guess her phone was about to be shut off. Maybe she didn't pay the bill, whatever. According to Bradley, it's about to be shut off. So he gives her his phone. But Courtney's phone wasn't shut off yet. So now Courtney has two phones that are active and usable, hers and Bradley's, allegedly. And what does she need that for? Because her phone hasn't been shut off yet. So Detective Pisker then asked Bradley about the Ford F-150 truck because apparently that truck belonged to Bradley. And Bradley said that he had driven the truck up until October 21st of 2025, but then he parked it in the driveway of Courtney's house because the license plate expired. According to Bradley, the seats were out of the truck because they were trying to get it cleaned up so that Courtney's son Bentley could drive it when he turned 16. Now, keep in mind, Bentley, I think he's 14 years old. So they're really working hard to get this truck cleaned up and ready for Bentley to drive in 2 years. They got plenty of time. Bradley once again denied being at the house at all on Monday night, and he claimed that he was at the house the following day, Tuesday, with Bentley while Courtney was in town, and that's when Courtney texted him the location of Rebecca's phone. Bradley told Detective Pisker that he refused to go get the phone alone because, quote, I'm not being accused of anything, end quote. And so he waited until Courtney got home so they could go and get the phone together. And Bradley confirmed that he was the one who found the phone. He picked it up, he handed it to Courtney, and he said he had no idea how Becca's phone could have gotten there, but he said she had walked that trail in the past. Okay, on November 13th, the police issued a public appeal for Rebecca Park to get in contact with them, telling her that they understood if she was scared or hiding. The statement said, quote, Rebecca, the sheriff's office and people close to you are concerned about your well-being. Based on statements made by people close to you, it's possible that you are scared or hiding for reasons known only by you. End quote. The statement also said that law enforcement had looked into Rebecca's financials. There'd been no activity on her accounts since before she went missing, but investigators were aware that Becca had been given $2,000 in cash on the night she went missing, and this would have given her the ability to avoid being tracked by her financial transactions. At this point, I don't know if this public statement was put out by law enforcement to throw off Courtney and Bradley and make them believe that the police were buying their story, because there's no way after the previous interviews with those two shady individuals that the detectives weren't thoroughly suspicious that Bradley and Courtney were involved at least in some way. But I know one thing. If the police weren't suspicious by November 13th, they would have certainly been 2 days later when someone named Candace Freeman gave a report to Deputy Jacob Caponen of the Wexler County Sheriff's Office. So Candace is actually Courtney Bartholomew's sister. And she said that on October 28th, 2025, just about, roughly a week before Rebecca Park went missing, Courtney texted her and she asked for some baby items because she'd suddenly become the new mother of a baby boy that nobody even knew she was pregnant with, not even her own sister. So Courtney told her sister Candace that she'd given birth to this baby early at 28 weeks, and currently the baby was in the NICU in Grand Rapids. This baby, who Courtney claimed to have named Ashton Lee Bartholomew, was supposed to be able to come home that week as long as he was doing well. So on Monday, November 3rd, pay attention to that date, Monday, November 3rd, Candace asked her sister Courtney, "You still bringing your son Ashton home? What's going on? How is everything?" And Courtney replied, quote, "No, he did a backslide, but still hoping this week," end quote. Pay attention to the date of that text. Once again, November 3rd, the same day Courtney would pick up her very pregnant daughter and say she was bringing her for milkshakes. And then that pregnant daughter was never seen again. And then that pregnant daughter's body was found in the woods with her baby cut out of her. So the text that Courtney sent saying she was still hoping that they could bring her son home that week, that was sent at 2:52 p.m., hours before Courtney picked up Rebecca from Rich's house. And the next text that Courtney sent her sister was at 11:17 p.m. that same night. Once again, this date and this time are important, 11:17 p.m. And that text said, quote, My son passed away, end quote. The next day, this would be Tuesday, November 4th, at 11:18 a.m., Candace asked Courtney, well, what happened? What happened with baby Ashton? Was he sick? Was he just born too early and he was too weak and they couldn't save him? Courtney replied back, quote, I don't know what happened. I just know he wasn't getting air. All I know is I watched my child die right in front of me, end quote. This is a very important statement because at the time it was said, nobody knew how true and accurate it was. I watched my child die in front of me. November 4th, the day that Rebecca was reported missing. Courtney doesn't mention anything to Candace about her daughter being missing until 7:11 that night. So November 4th in the morning, Courtney is saying, I watched my child die in front of me. She doesn't say my son. She doesn't say Ashton. I watched my child die in front of me. This is all lining up for you, I'm sure. So this is the part of the story when Courtney Bartholomew, Rich Failer, and Kimberly Park all start talking. They all start taking to the internet, pointing fingers at each other, saying random things. Rich did an interview with Steph's case files on, I believe, November 17th. At least that's the day it was posted. Courtney did an interview on the same channel that was posted, I think, November 19th. And Kimberly Park did an interview with that same channel on November 22nd, I believe. So we've already talked about Rich and what he said, which wasn't really much, honestly. So now let's talk about what Courtney Bartholomew said. She claims that she's had people harassing her and her family. They're stalking her house. Her son's truck has been vandalized. Okay? Let's go back for a second. When she's talking about people who are stalking her and harassing her and her family, she's talking about the people who are like, where the hell is Rebecca? Because they already suspect her by now. And when she says that her son's truck has been vandalized, she's not talking about her son Bentley's truck. Because Bentley isn't even 16 yet, right? They're getting this truck fixed up so he can use it when he's 16. She's talking about Bradley Bartholomew's white Ford F-150. This truck is very, very important. And I'm going to tell you why soon. So it's been vandalized. And she means that somebody threw paint on this truck, allegedly. So then Courtney says when she gets the money, she's going to get SD cards for her security cameras, right? Because the host that she's talking to is like, oh, well, you should make sure you get those security cameras up and working so that you have like an account or proof if these people go too far. And Courtney's like, don't worry, I'm not like scared, okay? Because at this point, I have the deadliest dog in the world. I'm not worried about it. And the police told me if these people come on my property and my dog kills them, I mean, it is what it is. No problem for me. Okay, that's crazy. So the host then poses a question to Courtney. She's like, hey, you say you need money for the cameras, for the SD cards, but you stated yesterday that you're starting IVF. And Courtney's like, hey, that's a completely different story. $35 a month for some fertility pills. That's not taking anything away from like my kids. I'm still like putting food in my kids' mouths. Like that's nobody's business what I do. Like one thing doesn't have anything to do with the other. Courtney then says that the police came to her house and she's asked, well, did they have a search warrant? And Courtney says, no, they didn't need a search warrant. I willingly cooperated and let them search it. So then the host of the channel, she says, Courtney, do you have plans to move to Texas? Courtney says yes. Courtney says she's an amputee. She can't take the cold anymore. You know, she wants to move to warmer climates. So the host then says, all right, listen, it's kind of weird that at the same time your daughter is due to give birth, you're doing IVF treatments and you're planning to move to Texas and you're telling people that you had a baby who's in the NICU. Do you see that this is like not really looking good for you? Do you kind of see that it looks like you pretended to be pregnant and then you were planning to steal your daughter's baby and kill her and then like cut her baby out of her and then flee to Texas? Like, do you see how people might think that? And then Courtney said, quote, that is about the lowest thing I've ever heard. And my son, he's 14. He's always wanted a sibling. And I've put off having a baby. I'm getting an age where if I'm going to have one, I'm going to have one, end quote. She's basically saying she's been wanting to have a baby. We'll see that Courtney Bartholomew wants to have a lot of babies. That her youngest son, Bentley, who's 14, he wants a sibling really badly. And she's like, at this point, you know, I'm either going to have one or I'm not. Like, I'm not going to, you know, that's the lowest thing I ever heard, that I would kill my daughter and steal her baby. the lowest thing she's ever heard. The lowest thing she's ever done, you mean. So Courtney then goes on to say she has an older son that is 25. She has Rebecca, who's 22, Kimberly, who's 21, and she has Bentley, who is 14, and her baby. She's like, I love, kids. I love having kids. Like, of course, I want to have a baby. If I have a baby, that's great. If not, whatever. But I have my kids already, and I love them all, and they're great. She then starts going on about Rich Failer, Rebecca's fiance, how he's lazy and a drug addict, which I believe the drug addict part, at least, is true. There are a lot of people saying that Rebecca and Rich did these drugs together and that there had been times in the past where they'd gotten clean and, then relapsed. But I don't know exactly where they were at in their addiction status at the time of Rebecca's disappearance. But Courtney then says, Rich beat Rebecca. And since Rebecca's been missing, Rich has been running around town with his baby mama, Ashley, and other women, and he's getting drugs, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care that Rebecca's gone. Courtney said she gave Rebecca the $2,000 in cash in hundreds. And so the host of Steph's Case Files was like, well, Rebecca's purse, her wallet, her ID, everything was at Rich's. So where did she put the money? And Courtney was like, she put the money in the pocket of the sweatpants she was wearing. Now, remember that Courtney told the police that Rebecca had been texting that night. Well, now she says on this interview that she saw Rebecca look at her phone a few times, but that was about it. Because the police already told her that Rebecca didn't text anyone that night, so she's changing her story again to fit with the new evidence police are giving her, at least new evidence to her. Courtney also claims that it was Rich who deleted everything in Becca's phone from that Monday, right? She says that, she gives this whole long winding statement about how he took the phone. He was the only one who knew the PIN. He had the phone all day. It didn't get to the police office until like 6 p.m. that night, et cetera, et cetera. He's the one who deleted it. Then towards the end of the live, Kimberly Park gets on, okay? Rebecca's sister, half-sister, and Courtney's other daughter, Kimberly Park, she gets on the live. And things are just getting wild at this point, okay? The allegations made here, I don't even know if I can say them, but Kimberly and Courtney both are kind of talking about how Rich is basically a sexual predator and he's always, talking to other women and he's sending inappropriate texts to like this 14 or 15-year-old girl or 16-year-old girl that they know, that they call a cousin, but she's not really a cousin. I don't know. But Kimberly also says that Rich has been sending her sexy texts. She starts reading them off. I definitely can't say them here. And then she's asked by the host if Rich has sent her anything since Rebecca's been missing. She looks at her phone. She says no. But she tells everyone on that live, everyone that's there, which I think was like 1,000 people at this point. She said when she was at Rich's house the other night, getting Becca's phone, November 4th, he asked her if she wanted to go back into his bedroom with him and have sex. Like I said, this would have been Tuesday night, the same day that Rebecca's reported missing. We don't know if that's true. We don't know if that's true. But this is what Kimberly says. She goes on to say that Rich deleted things from Rebecca's phone because either he or Rebecca or both are trying to hide something, which is most likely affairs because they both have been cheating on each other. And Rich does say this at some point. He said that he was aware that Rebecca had, slept with somebody else, had cheated on him, but she was done with that. And he was 100% sure that the baby she was carrying was his. But apparently they're both having affairs. They're both cheating on each other. And Kimberly said that Rich had been hooking up with his baby mama, Ashley, and he deletes texts from her. And he also deletes texts from Kimberly, to and from Kimberly, because they're texting sexy things to each other all the time while he's with his pregnant girlfriend, fiance. And she said that Rebecca also deletes things from her phone because she was also having affairs and talking to people she shouldn't be talking to, which I think is just an abhorrent way to speak about your sister who's missing. Whether it's true or not, I just think it's disgusting. And Kimberly's basically suggesting like, oh, she thinks that Rebecca's hiding at this point, like hiding and Rich knows where she is, while Courtney's over here saying that other people are hiding Rebecca because she's afraid of Rich. It's like, ladies, make up your mind. So Kimberly said that several years ago, when Rebecca was dating a guy named Travis, she, out of the blue, showed up on Kimberly's doorstep and was like, I need to hide out here. Don't tell Travis where I am. And then she proceeded to hide out at Kimberly's for 2 weeks. And Kimberly goes on and on about this, like she's just this Mother Teresa. Like, and I let her stay in I gave her my own bed. I never questioned her. I kept her secrets. I never told anyone where she was, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, Courtney is saying, like, hey, she's done this before. She disappears herself when she's trying to get away from people. She doesn't want anyone to know where she is. So this could be what she's doing. So then Courtney, Becca's mother, she goes on to make a ton of allegations about Rebecca being involved with drugs, and then some guy in prison who put a hit on Becca. And Courtney then says her daughter Kimberly is a police informant. And this is after Kimberly was no longer on the live. She had left. This actually may have been a separate day. This woman talked so much and said so many stupid things that I just lost track. But the host of Steph's Case Files, she's like, really, that's weird, because usually if people are like police informants, they're not supposed to tell anybody. And then Courtney was like, yeah, that's what I said, but it is weird how, Kimberly's home hasn't been searched and how she's not getting in trouble with the police. It's very suspicious to me, and Kimberly's not really working with the recovery group. So the recovery group, I believe, is like this group of local volunteers and citizens who had just made it their mission to find out what happened to Rebecca. And she said the recovery group wanted to go through Rebecca's phone, and Kimberly refused to give the PIN for the phone to them, and she just hasn't. It's very suspicious. She's very suspicious. So Courtney's now like, okay, Rich is suspicious. This random guy in jail may have put a hit on Becca. And her own sister, Kimberly, she's suspicious too. She may be involved. And apparently Courtney is coming out and saying all of this stuff because she found out that Kimberly was on another live talking shit about Courtney, saying, she couldn't have kids anymore because she had an operation, and basically talking a lot of shit about her mother and not defending her. And then Courtney texted Kimberly to confront her. She's like, why are you talking shit about me? And Kimberly was like, oh, I was using reverse psychology because if I defended you, then they would suspect us as working. So I'm using reverse psychology to try to trick all these people. So now Kimberly and Courtney have turned on each other. Courtney said Kimberly's faking it. She only cries when you look at her. This isn't even bothering her. She then says she believes Kimberly knows where Rebecca is. She says, quote, everybody's believing what Kimberly is saying, so I want everybody to know that. And what she is saying is a lie. And according to the detective, well, according to her, she's not a suspect. End quote. So during Kimberly's live on the 22nd, she's asked by someone from the recovery team, the community searchers, hey, why does your mom, Courtney, have new carpet in her house? Why does she have new couches in her house? Why are her walls freshly painted? And Kimberly was like, oh, I can't explain that, but I can tell you the couches and the carpet were there when me and Rebecca were at Courtney's house for dinner on November 1st. And so the people on the live then confront Kimberly. They say, no, you're lying. We have solid proof that you just lied because they have pictures from inside the house that were taken just days before Becca went missing. And those couches weren't there and the carpet wasn't there and the paint was different, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, these people are very invested and they are good, okay? So Kimberly then says her mother, Courtney, is currently being a stuck-up little witch and won't give her shit. And this is relevant because Kimberly says that Courtney has some of her stuff. She's like, she's got my wallet, she's got my meds, she's got everything. We're going to come back to that because it's true. Kimberly did leave some things in Courtney's Ford Escape that Courtney and Bradley Bartholomew are not going to give her back because they're going to use Kimberly's items for something, okay? So then Kimberly says that Courtney told her if she says anything to anyone, both she and her daughter, who's just 1 year old, they're going down for it. So Kimberly's saying that Courtney's threatening her, and Kimberly says Courtney told her this to her face. And then the people on the live were like, how did she tell it to you, to your face? You said you haven't seen her today. And she said, no, this was the day after Rebecca vanished that she told me this. So these lives with Kimberly and Courtney, they're just dumpster fires, okay, with allegations being thrown around and the most wild things being said. But the person who really isn't talking at this point is Rich, who both Courtney and Kimberly are accusing of things, but he's being pretty quiet after that one live that he did. And once again, y'all aren't going to make me side with a man who's a sex offender. I respect him for that more than what these two women are doing. I have to say, like, he came, he put a statement out, he went live once. As far as I know, there's no affidavits as of now that have come out with interviews from Rich Failer, so I could be completely wrong and those could come out later. But as of now, it seems that he wasn't involved. Allegedly, we'll see, don't come for me. So on November 22nd, Kimberly Park spoke to Detective Pisker, and she told Detective Pisker that her mother and Bradley Bartholomew had killed Rebecca. They had struck her on her head. It caused her to have a seizure. And when they couldn't revive her, Bradley contacted one of his friends, someone who picked Rebecca's body up and took it away. That is what Kimberly Park told the police on the 22nd. On November 24th, Courtney Bartholomew went into the sheriff's office for another interview with Detective Pisker, where he talks to her about the things she's been saying on social media, and he also asked her about some property of Kimberly's that she had. Remember the stuff that Kimberly left in Courtney's Ford Escape? And Courtney was like, yeah, I do have the items. And Detective Pisker was like, well, do you just want to give them to me? Because they're in the Ford Escape, and then I'll give them to Kimberly. And she said no. She did not want to leave them with Detective Pisker to return to Kimberly, even though Kimberly really wanted her stuff back. Now, Bradley Bartholomew was also interviewed again on this day at the Michigan State Police Crime Lab in Grayling. Bradley claimed that he was trying to protect Kimberly Park, that it was Kimberly Park who had done something to Rebecca, and she had taken Rebecca down a 2-track behind the house, and he believed that Rebecca was dead. He also said that he had actually been at the house on November 1st, that Saturday when Kimberly and Rebecca had been at Courtney's for dinner, even though both Bradley and Courtney have already told the police that Kimberly and Rebecca don't like him, won't have anything to do with him, and won't go into the house if he's there. But now apparently he's there for the dinner. And he claimed that after dinner, Kimberly Park had taken him aside and she started asking him about the 2 tracks behind the house. And then she stated to him that she needed to get Rebecca out of the picture. On the same day, Kimberly Park also has another interview with the police, and she told Detective Sergeant Alicia Baxter that she was and has been in a romantic relationship with Rich Failer that was complicated by his relationship with her sister. I know this seems chaotic and nonsensical right now, but bear with me because some of it, at least, is going to start falling into place. Some of it, I think, we'll never make sense of. So on November 25th, the Wexford County Sheriff's Central Dispatch received a 911 call from a woman named Courtney Letterman. And I think Courtney is part of this recovery team, the citizens who've been out there looking for Rebecca. And she called and she said she'd found a body that looked gutted, covered with leaves, at a location that was approximately 2.5 miles west of Courtney Bartholomew's house, in a straight line 2.5 miles west. So Wexford County Deputy Jacob Kaponen responded to the location and observed the remains of a young woman with a tattoo around or near her left eye that was consistent with Rebecca Park's driver's license identification picture. This deputy reported that the woman's abdomen appeared to have been cut open. Of course, we know that this was the body of Rebecca Park. Her baby was gone, forcefully removed from her body, and it was strange that law enforcement had not found her here, but a group of citizen volunteers who were searching an area that had reportedly already been gone through during official law enforcement searches found her. We're going to come back to this. There's a lot to talk about in this case. So Rebecca's autopsy was conducted at Michigan State University by Dr. Christine James, who found several injuries to Rebecca's body. 6 sharp force wounds to the back. Basically, she had been stabbed in the back, which is a very appropriate way of putting it because Rebecca was stabbed in the back, not just physically, but in every possible way. She had 2 more stab wounds to her right upper arm, 1 stab wound to the left trapezius area, 2 stab wounds in her neck, 2 stab wounds to the face. The right side of Rebecca's face also had a laceration and an irregular wound to her cheek that the autopsy report says they can't really say what made this wound. I have some thoughts. We'll talk about that. So Rebecca's abdomen was found to have incised wounds, meaning she was cut into, and the placenta was hanging from the wound in her abdomen with the attached umbilical cord. So Dr. James reported that Rebecca Park's stomach contained copious amounts of blue-green chalky residue. A lot of people have been like, what is that? Was she poisoned? And I know we've talked about how I think the lasagna story is strange, and I wondered if Rebecca was given something, but given what we do know, Rebecca was 38 weeks pregnant. She was having stomach pains the night before for a few days before and had recently been served lasagna that she reported tasting unusual. I'm not saying there was nothing in that lasagna, but it is likely that Rebecca's stomach contained a large amount of maybe antacid tablets, Rolaids, Tums, things like that. Pregnant women get heartburn a lot. When I was pregnant with my daughter Bella, I was eating a lot of Tums, a lot. And she came out with a lot of hair, but I can't think of any other explanation for what that kind of white-green chalky substance in Rebecca's stomach would be. So then a flurry of search warrants went out for the Bartholomew home, the cell phones of Courtney and Bradley Bartholomew, and while Michigan State Police Trooper Cody Campbell was inside Courtney's house securing it for the crime lab, he heard Courtney mention to Bradley that the seat cover for the Ford F-150 had recently been burned and disposed of because something had been spilled on it. Now remember, we got all these stories about the Ford F-150, why the seats aren't in there. Brad says they're getting it ready for Bentley. Courtney said, I think that something had been paint was on it, and apparently somebody, defaced the truck by throwing paint on it, and now it's just like, oh, something was spilled on it. Now, remember also that Bradley had told police he wasn't at the house on November 3rd because Rebecca was going to be there, so he was at his place in the woods, but according to his cell phone, because we got that tower dump now, Bradley was in the location of the house that night, or at least his cell phone was, right? And we know he said, Courtney has my cell phone. Bullshit, because Courtney's phone was also in that area, and records show communication between the two phones that night. So what, Courtney's got your two phones, texting and calling herself? No. Bradley Bartholomew's records showed device movement and lingering in the areas consistent with where Bradley and Courtney reported recovering Rebecca's cell phone and where Rebecca Park's body was found on several occasions on the evening of Monday, November 3rd. So I said a lot there. On November 3rd, Bradley's cell phone showed that he was in these areas where the phone was found, where Rebecca's body was found on the evening of November 3rd, and he lingered in these areas at some points. We also know that Rebecca's phone showed her arriving to her mother's house on November 3rd, shortly after 7 p.m., and the communication between Courtney and Bradley's phones, that kind of began to be consistent shortly after Rebecca arrived to that area with Courtney. So Brad's call detail records highlighted the following calls as being of investigative interest. At 6:13 p.m., there was a 2-minute and 2-second outgoing call from Bradley Bartholomew to Courtney Bartholomew. And at that time, both devices were close to the area of Courtney's house. This was before Rebecca's device entered the area, so I can assume that it's because it was before Courtney left to get Rebecca from Rich's house, because it's not far from, her house, Courtney's house, to Rich's house, so it was probably before she left. Now, at 7:29 p.m., there was a 57-second call from Bradley to Courtney. And at 7:33 p.m., there was a 54-second call from Bradley to Courtney. Both of these calls took place after Rebecca's arrival to the location, and both calls show that both of the devices were in the area of Courtney's home. So at this time, when these calls are being made from Bradley to Courtney, his phone's at the area of Courtney's home, Courtney's phone is there, Rebecca's phone is there. They're all three there together, even though Bradley says he's in the woods. So after Rebecca's body was recovered, Detective Sergeant Jamie Voss and Detective Sergeant Olivia Whetstone met with Kimberly Park at her house to interview her. And this is when Kimberly told them, oh, by the way, I'm sorry about what I said before, that my mom and my stepdad had hit Rebecca over the head and killed her. That's not true. Actually, it was Rebecca's fiance and my boyfriend, Rich Failer, who killed Rebecca. And he told me that Rebecca has been taken care of and that I don't have to worry about it. She claimed that it was Rich who told her to lie to the police and blame Rebecca's murder on Courtney and Bradley. And at that time, During this interview, Kimberly Park was arrested for lying to the police and obstructing an investigation, and she was brought to Detective Pisker. So she was arrested, and then she actually asked to speak to Detective Pisker. She wanted to be brought to him, and then she waived her Miranda rights. And she told Pisker that on November 4th, she was at Rich Fahler's home when he told her he had killed Rebecca. But then he said, "I'm not going to tell you the details, Kimberly, because I want to protect you." Kimberly also claimed that during a different conversation, Rich Fahler had told her something had gone wrong when he tried to cut the baby out of Rebecca. But he claimed someone else, someone named Austin Nowland, had helped him do this. Kimberly also claimed that Rich had been encouraging her to mislead the investigation, and this was the reason she'd been going on social media and sharing incorrect information and making all sorts of wild allegations, and that's why she was telling the police the false stories. She said that Rich had come up with the story to tell the police because he was becoming concerned that the investigation was getting too close to him, and that on Thursday or Friday, before Saturday, November 22nd, he helped her create the accusation that she had made to Detective Pisker during the interview on that day. So Detective Pisker then interviewed this Austin Nowland person on November 26th, and not only did Austin deny involvement, his cell records did not even place him in Wexford County on November 3rd or 4th, and Austin cooperated with the police. He allowed them to search his phone, he allowed them to search his black Chevy Malibu, and he let them know that he had been previously in relationships with both Rebecca and Kimberly Park. All right, let's rewind a bit because it was on November 24th that I believe Courtney Bartholomew, went back to Steph's case files and did another interview. And this would have been before Rebecca's body was found and before Kimberly Park was arrested, but on the same day that Bradley and Courtney would end up talking to the police, and the day after Kimberly told the police that her mother and stepfather had killed Rebecca. And she's got stuff to say now, right? Because apparently there's lie detector tests involved. And now Courtney's going to make an allegation that she does know who was in that black car with tinted windows. It was Kimberly Park, allegedly. So yes, I'm going to have to end this now because there's just way too much information to put into one video. I really wanted to get it all into one video, but once you start getting in there, you realize like there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm trying to go easy on my editor, not to give him a 3-hour video. There's just so much more to talk about. Like I said, lie detector tests, arrests, confessions, the probable cause affidavits are just devastating. And then at the center of it all, honestly, a huge question as to where is Rebecca Park's baby and what was the actual motive here, right? Why did anyone feel they had to go to these extremes and end the lives of a 22-year-old woman and, honestly, her unborn baby? You know, I will get the video out within just a few days. So, you know, don't look it up. Don't go elsewhere. I promise I will have the next video up within just a few days of this one posting. So you don't have to wait very long for the rest of this case. But I think breaking it up will help me with, you know, editing and also with just the consumption on your behalf of actually watching this, because it's a lot. I've got charts. I've got like, you know, stuff with people's names and locations and times of texting. And there's a lot that I want to talk about, plus what my final thoughts are as to what I believe happened here and what the evidence is showing us so far. But yeah, that's all for now. So please let me know what you think about this case so far. Let me know in the comments. I can't wait to discuss this case with you in the comments. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Okay, subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. And stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. I love you so much, and I'll see you very, very soon.